Parameters in C# allows us to pass data into the method for processing. So there's two ways that we can do this. That's going to be by value and by reference. Passing parameters by value is the default method of passing parameters in C#. So what it does is a copy of the parameter's value is passed to the method, and then changes made to the parameter inside of the method do not affect the original value outside of the method. When we pass parameters by reference, this allows a method to modify the value of the parameter. So the ref keyword is going to be used to indicate that a parameter is passed by reference. So let's take a look how we can do this. We're going to make a public class, and we're going to call this parameter. And then the first method that we're going to use is the increment. We're going to create an increment method, and this is going to be for passing the parameter by its original value. So let's do public void, and then I'm going to do increment, and then we're going to create an integer num parameter inside of there. And then what we're going to do is we want to increment it, so we're going to take num and we're just going to increment it by 1, and then we're going to get the console to output the increment method, or inside the increment method. So what we'll do is console write line, and we'll do inside increment method num. And this is going to be just passing the parameter by value. And let's make a comment right here. We'll just say passing by value. And then underneath this one, we're going to do another comment. We're going to say passing by reference. And then what we're going to do is we're going to increment by the reference. So we're going to, instead of our parameter saying just integer num, we're going to have a reference integer num for our parameter, and pretty much type the same exact line of code. So let's do public void increment, and then we're going to do by ref, and then we're going to do ref int num. And then of course we're going to do a increment by 1 for our num, or our parameter num. And then we're going to have the console write the line inside increment by ref method, and then we're going to type num inside of there. And these are our two methods. So our first method, we're just going to pass by the original value. Our second method, we're going to pass by reference. Well, how can we do this? Of course, we're going to have to run our static void main method here. So let's go ahead and create that. And what's going to be interesting here is this, when we create this integer number, we're going to see where it's going to increment outside the method after the increment, and then after the reference by the increment. It's pretty straightforward. It's just a nice way to concise your code when you're passing your parameters. So let's go parameter example, just like we did in the other examples, and we're just going to do new parameter. This is going to allow us to use our class name here and pass these methods. So let's do integer number 10, or integer number equals 10. Sorry about that. And then we're going to call this new variable here. So let's go example dot increment, and then number. Because remember, we just changed pretty much our parameter num to the variable number with our new parameter here, parameter class, and we want to get the increment right here, the value 10. We want that to be incremented by 1. So it's going to run this method right here. It's going to run the increment method here, and then we're going to put our semicolon, and we're just going to say passing the value. I'm going to save that really quick, and then I'm going to tell the console to write the line outside method after increment, and then it's going to print out the number. And then right below that, we're going to do example, and we're going to say increment by reference, and we're going to get ref of number, or the reference of number, which is going to be that 10 that we assigned to that variable there. Of course, put your semicolon, and we're going to say passing by reference. We're going to do a console write line, and of course we're going to say outside method after increment by reference. And then inside of here, against it, we're going to put number. We're going to save that. So what we should see is, for integer number, when we run the increment example, we should see the number of 11 printed out for our first method when it runs that method. Then we should also see, we should see the number 10 first, then we should see the number 11. When we see the example increment by reference, we should see the same output, but we should see the number 10 and then 11 as well inside of that method. So let's run it and see what happens. And as you see, looks like I had a little backwards here, sorry about that. As you see inside the increment method, so inside the increment method, after it runs that num plus plus, and we increment number 10 by 1 increment, then you will see that we get 11. And then outside of the increment, the outside method after the increment, so what we see here is right here, if I can highlight it, we have the number 10, and that's the outside method there. And that's because, remember, it changes the parameter inside the method, but it's not going to affect the method or the parameter or the original value of the parameter or variable outside of that method. So that's what happens here in this outside method after increment. We're not changing the value of 10, but we have changed it in the increment example there. So if we go down to increment, or inside the increment by reference method, you see that it automatically printed out 11. Well, that's because we've modified the value of the parameter, and it's indicating what's been passed by the reference. And so because that reference is asking us to do a num plus plus, then that's why we automatically have 11 printed out. And then outside the increment, or outside the method by increment by reference, we automatically see it's printed out 11, and that's because it's already running that method to change that parameter. So next, let's talk about return types. Return types in C# specifies the type of data that a method can return to its caller. So if a method doesn't return a value, then its return type is void. I'm going to show you how we can use the return type in order to call some data. So this is going to be really similar to what we did in the method overloading and method declaration and invocation. It's going to be really similar to that, and it's pretty much the same thing. So you should be familiar with this already, but I'm just going to walk through it once again, just so we can understand how data is returned to a method when it's being called. So let's make a public class, and we'll call it return. And then what we're going to do is create a method called plus, where we're going to add two variables together, or two parameters together. So I'm going to do public integer plus, and I'm going to do integer A and integer B. And then of course inside of here, we want to, if I can type correctly, we want to return A plus B. So If you remember in the beginning, we didn't use return in our method declaration and invocation lessons. We simply assigned integer sum is equal to a plus b. Here we just want to return the value. So let's go ahead and make a quick message for when we get the sum of these two digits, and let's see how we can use these methods. So let's do a public void, and that is going to be message, and we're going to do a string for message, and then of course we're going to have the console, right line, and whatever we put in the parameter for message. So that part there isn't too important. Really just focus on this method here where we're just returning the value of the a and the integer a and the integer b parameters being added together. Now, of course, we're going to make our public main method here. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our class name return. Of course, we're going to do a calculation, assign it to a new variable called calculation, which is new return, and now we're going to get the integer sum. We're going to create an integer sum, and it's going to be calc dot plus, because remember we want to invoke, or we want to call and use that method that we placed, and then we're going to place our parameters for integer a and b. So I'm going to do 15 and we'll do 43. I'm going to close that out, and then I'm going to do calc, and then I want to call the message method, and I'm just going to say sum is, or we'll say sum of a and b is, and then it's going to be sum, because remember we just initialized that new variable for sum there as an integer by getting the plus method, which is returning a plus b, or in this case 15 plus 43. And if we run that code, we should see 58 printed out in our console, or our terminal, debug console. And as you see, sum of a and b is 58, and we can place this, we can do any number, and it's going to just keep doing the addition or returning that a plus b method for us.